So let's dive into Run DMC, Raising Hell. This is all the way back in 1986. This is such early hip hop that Dr. Dre's The Chronic doesn't come out for 6 more years. So this is a groundbreaking album. The first rap album to go platinum, the first rap album to go double platinum, the first rap album to go to #1 on the R&B charts. There was no rap charts before that. Because of this, they then create a rap/R&B chart. First rap song to go to the top 5 with Walk This Way, the crossover hit with rock and rap. This is like the birth of the rock rap genre that led to years later, 1992, one of my top 3 favorite albums of all time, Rage Against the Machine, self-titled debut. That would not exist without the precursor, this album laying the foundation. Talk to me about the Run DMC album. Why is this top 5? It's funny. It's funny. As a drummer, you have this in your top 5 where it's like, it's a drum machine, but give me the goods. Why is this in the top 5?
Yeah, I'm glad. I love talking about this record because this is everything for me. Is certainly not what people would expect, coming from a rock guy. But when I was a kid learning to drum, I became a drummer on these early hip hop records. I had no idea what drum machines were. I didn't know anything except, what you hear on a song is what that is. So when I was 11 or 12 years old and I heard that first Walk This Way, Aerosmith, Run DMC thing, that was all I knew, man. I didn't know that was a electronic drum set or a real drum set. None of that made a difference to me. I just heard the beat, and I heard these people, the rapping to the beat, and it was my first sense of, I guess, really falling in love with rhythm and stuff. When I just had a snare drum at home. Before I could afford a drum set, or my parents bought me a drum set, I used to play my snare drum. I used to play the melodies of that Run DMC record. So it's like, so Peter Piper Pit Pepper, the one right rhyme, Humpty Dumpty fell down. This is our time. Check it, what did it? He was quick. I would just drum what they were saying, the whole record. So it gave me a sense of, I guess, timing and rhythm. And then after I would drum along to what those guys were rapping, I started listening to actual beats. Were always just 808 drum machines. And he just gave me this whole foundation for like falling in love with like heavy metal and stuff after that. It's just funny that people, know me as a rock guy or a metal guy, but it all derived from Raising Hell, Run DMC. Everything from like listening to what the lyrics were. Before that, for me, there was Michael Jackson, there was Pink Floyd, there was the Beatles, there was Elvis in my house, but Run DMC was the first record of my own, away from my family. That was my first thing I grasped on. And, and I sat in my bedroom and listened to every song. It was my first introduction to, guys making beats up with their mouth. There's one song on there. It's called Is It Live? Or there's one song where the whole song is just the beat bopping. Yeah. So it's just all on that album, everything rhythmically, lyrically, just, everything was done on a computer, but I didn't know that. All I had at that time was a pillow or a snare drum on my bed, playing along with that stuff. And that's really where I figured out, all the things that I came to love about, I guess, being a drummer, which is so funny that all came from nothing of a real drummer. Which is interesting. Is Grace, the Blue Skies, then later it was a V drum kit. So it's like it all kind of came full circle. But yeah, that album, man, it's like those other records we talked about. I can, put the first song on to the last song. It's still, it holds up, from start to finish. It sounds amazing. Rick Rubin did that record back in the day, when he was still kind of unknown.
We were talking Rick Rubin working with Metallica, and then Rick Rubin actually did this early hip hop album as well.
This was the sort of the birth of Rick Rubin back then with Run DMC might have been his first, and Russell Simmons. Yeah. Like those, that was, And it was also the first introduction to getting a rock band and I don't even know if it was as known as hip hop yet. It was just rap music back then, New York rap music. But getting Aerosmith to work with them, there were so many firsts on that record. But none of that really made a difference to me as a kid. It was just, I'd never heard anything like that. Yeah, it's just still, it's such a cool fucking sounding record still, man. If nobody's heard that, man, put Raising Hell on. The first song of the record is Peter Piper, and just goes, it's killer, man, from start to finish.
And they're going back between guys, right? Like during that intro rap, it's like you can hear it's two different guys rapping off of each other.
Yes, absolutely. Going left and right on the speakers, which is a Rick Rubin thing. It's such an important record to me, man, that I'm glad when you originally called and asked me, I was like trying to think, which ones I would, because there's so many for all of us, how do you pick 5? But I'm so happy I got to at least put Run-DMC where it needs to be. Because without Run-DMC, for me, there would be no drumming, there'd be no songwriting, there'd be no, appreciation of any of this stuff. That album just is everything in my foundation as a musician.
So. I saw an interview with Rick Rubin where he talked about the early days of hip hop, and that he would see hip hop groups live. And then anytime he heard hip hop groups recorded, it was never the same. Like he'd see one hip hop group, and then when he heard that same hip hop group recorded, it was not even close to being the same. It's like there was like a different rule set for them live and then them recorded. And those early hip hop albums that he did with the Beastie Boys and LL Cool J and Run-DMC, his goal was, how can I actually take what they do live and channel that and represent that on record? And that's kind of his claim to fame, is bringing more of the hard edge of the live stuff and bringing that to an album. And I think that's a part of what makes those early Rick Rubin albums so unique.
And they're heavy records. Like, when it became because those are all New York records, the Beastie Boys, LL Cool J, Houdini, the Fat Boys, Grandmaster Flash, all that stuff. They're such heavy sounding records. Where you got into the 90s of more of the Dr. Dre stuff, it became more like low end, and it's a different kind of heavy. Those 80s records to me are, you can put on South of Heaven, Slayer, and Beastie Boys, License to Ill, and you can hear the fucking heaviness in both. Or you can put on Raising Hell. I got to mention, honorable mention to the Fat Boys too. That's another record that, I don't know what their first record's called, but it was all rhythmic to me, man. Like when those guys used to beatbox in their mouths, they were drumming with their mouths. And again, before I could afford, before my parents bought me drums and stuff, that's all I had was trying to do stuff with my mouth, playing on pillows, playing with my hands on stuff. And it was like trying to create rhythms. And that's kind of where I learned it from, all those 80s rap records. So Run-DMC still, like, it's probably my favorite album of all time. I'd say Raising Hell, number 1.
Wow, dude, that's a big statement. I mean, the other 4 albums are so great as well. So for you to say that's number 1,
as far as me in my path in life, Raising Hell is, like, I think what got me here today for sure.
So I had already mentioned all the things in which this album became the first to do, like breaking new ground for all these things. Another thing, it's the first rap album to be nominated for a Grammy. So that had never happened before this album. And I have 3 quotes that I thought were cool about this album, and then we'll move on to your final album pick. So 3 quotes. So the album sold more than 3 million copies. And the quote says, Raising Hell, because of selling 3 million copies, is credited with heralding the golden age of hip hop, as well as hip hop's album era, helping the genre achieve an unprecedented level of recognition amongst critics. So that's one. The Toronto Star described the album as the record to move rap from the ghetto to the suburbs. Blame it or celebrate it. You cannot deny Raising Hell's impact. And the last one is from Time Magazine, who stated that the album was rap's first masterpiece. So a few quotes I thought you would enjoy there.
Absolutely. It's first man. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the records that came before that, Houdini, obviously, Grandmaster Flash, there were such important records that led up to Raising Hell. But yeah, that was the big breakout record. And then, of course, I think right after Raising Hell, he did License to Ill. So super important records in hip hop history, man, for sure.